Hello, Gemini, and welcome to your basically bi-weekly reading. So this is for the new moon to the full moon, and this one in particular is quite special. If you follow astrology, you know that we're having not just the new moon, but we're also having a solar eclipse, and we're having Mercury go retrograde at the end of the week as well. So we're doing a little bit of a different kind of spread. So typically these are shorter videos that are 5 to 8 minutes long. These ones are going to be a little bit longer because I want to give a little extra guidance. So we're taking a look at what is coming up for our Geminis. And let's also take a look at, don't worry, I'll get into all of these cards and explain what, I wasn't feeling that. We'll take a look at what is coming up for you. So I will say that, oh, I don't know if I mentioned this, but this is for Gemini rising or Gemini sun, right? So I will say that the eclipse is happening on the 19th at 9:13 p.m. Pacific. So adjust for your time zone, and that's happening in the sign of Aries in both tropical and in sidereal astrology. So no matter which one you follow, it's all this Aries energy, which to me is really interesting because the moment that happens, that correlation happens, I see that as like the universe is online in both areas, and it's like underscore, circle it, highlight it, put the flashlights on it, right? So that's a pretty interesting, I love just kind of mentioning that. I think it's important. Also, when we have Mercury go retrograde, let's see, let me just concentrate for a second here. So we're taking a look at spiritual advice with that particular card. All right. So when we have Mercury going retrograde, it is actually, and Mercury going retrograde, by the way, Geminis are ruled by Mercury. So when it goes retrograde, it can have an effect. Obviously, it depends on like where in your chart it's happening and how it's being aspected. So interesting. Okay. But that is happening on the 21st, and that will be in Taurus for tropical astrology, and it'll be in Aries in sidereal astrology. So I will be doing probably like a reel or something like that. So make sure you're following me on like Instagram, just kind of explaining really quickly how you can find out which area of your life the eclipse is affecting. And you can also find out like which area of life the Mercury retrograde is going to be pertinent for during this period of time, right? So let's get into it. Let's take a look at, we're sticking with this particular deck so that we can take a look at where is your attention being drawn? Like if your guides are speaking to you and saying, okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening, like where can you put your attention, like where to focus your attention in on during this particular phase, which is basically 2 weeks between the new moon to the full moon. This is our waxing phase of the moon, right? It's a building of energy. So what we have is Libra showing up, and you can see that it says balance. I think that that's kind of accurate for like part of the energy, but it's not all of it, right? Again, so this is Gemini rising, Gemini sun, collective reading, right? So for you, this is definitely taking a look at how you can be in a space of harmony, like how you can harmonize not just with your relationships in your life, and I don't mean just romantic, I mean just like the relationships in your life, how you are relating with others, for you to bring harmony and balance into those spaces. You know, as somebody who is a Gemini, if you are Gemini, you're ruled by Mercury, right? That is a communication place. You put Mercury, or you put Gemini and Libra together, and you've got someone who has the potential to be really diplomatic and very fair and balanced. So I would say not just with your communication, but also in the way that you're relating to other people. That's mainly what I would say. Maybe for a couple of you, this might have to do, if you have legal matters going on, this might be there. But I think that this is really just about creating a sense of balance in your life, being fair, and also I would say being fair with yourself as well as with other people. I feel that pretty strongly. This reminds me of the Justice card in tarot. And it's just like, it has this quality of staying true to yourself and being fair like around, all around, right? Like the win-win situations all around, but also being fair about like what you talk with people about, how you talk with them, especially during retrogrades. I think it's important to, like, Mercury retrograde being, you know, connected to communication, like just maybe, you know, pausing before we speak and like thinking it through or feeling it through before we communicate with other people. So as far as like why I'm picking this particular deck for us to take a look at, I feel that this deck, being as provocative as it is meant to point out any kinds of shadows that we might be dealing with. Again, because it's a collective reading, this isn't going to land for every single Gemini rising or Gemini sun out there. So if this is your message, awesome. If not, if this is your sun sign reading, then check out your rising sign or get a, you know, personal reading. That's the best way to get specific. But for those of you who this does resonate, this is the Triumph of Lies. And what's interesting about this particular card, and if that feels, by the way, if it feels triggering, if it feels like it's provoking you, it's doing its job. That's what this deck is meant to do. It's meant to point at the things that feel really shadowy in our spaces. The reason why I wanted to use this particular card is because when we're dealing with the eclipse, it eclipses out the light, right? When the light gets eclipsed and casts shadows and shadows come forth, it's like things that we maybe have not really paid attention to or kind of pushed off to the side to deal with life kind of start to bubble up a little bit, especially because this particular one, we have it squaring Pluto. And so that's definitely going to be like the things that we try to like sweep into the corners, maybe making themselves more apparent on a felt level. Not necessarily what you'd see outwardly, but maybe, perhaps. So what we have showing up here as like one of the shadows that you could be paying attention to, and we all have many, many shadows that we're all working through and dealing with. So just to say that is the Triumph of Lies is really about the masks that we wear in the presence of other people, but not just the ones that we wear in different social situations, right? Like that's fair to say, is that maybe there are different facets of our personality that get expressed in different social situations or different scenarios, like between work to social life to home to family, right? And maybe not all of you is expressed in its totality in each one of these places. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the masks, the ways in which you hide yourself, or the ways in which you are not completely authentic in these spaces, but so much so that you start to identify with those masks and you forget that you're wearing those masks in the presence of those people or in those situations. And this is when we become identified with the lies that we tell, right? It is like a lie, right? It's a white lie maybe in some cases, and maybe in others it's a bigger kind of lie, but it's a lie in a way, right? Where when we are not being our authentic self, when we downplay what we think or feel, or, you know, like there are ways to sidestep that obviously, but when we are in those spaces where we pretend to be what we're not, to people please or to keep the peace or whatever it is, but we start to do it so much that we forget that we're doing it even. And so we become identified. It's almost like a mask that we just like don't even realize is on anymore, right? And so the spiritual advice that you're getting here is the Three of Wands. I think that there is something to remember about what you're here for, like the work that you're actually here for, what you're trying to create and what you're trying to move towards in your life. There are things that you're here to do. There are things that you're here to be. There are lands to explore. There are plans that you've enacted. And it's time to, I think, ground back into the things that you feel passionate about, that you feel creative about, that you feel connected to, that you feel, what's the other word I'm like trying to think of? It's like just eluding me for whatever reason, but to be connected to those, the things that you value. That's what it was. I was thinking like, so being connected to those things and really rooting back into that, get back into motion with those things. I think that sometimes that can help us break out of these spaces where we become maybe a little bit stagnant even. And so being able to be in this place where we root back into like enacting our plans, doing like the forward movement, and coming from this place of like, what am I passionate about? I'm taking steps towards, right? Like this is what this card is. It's like, I'm taking the steps. I'm putting the plans in motion. I'm working towards these things. Sometimes that movement can help to like really clear out a lot of things. So I hope that makes sense. I'm seeing pictures in my mind, and sometimes it's like hard for me to communicate what it is that I'm trying to say, that I see and that I feel. So I hope that that feels really clear. And then we have also the Eight of Wands coming up, which I really love that this is the card that's coming up for this particular position. What we're looking at is, you know, because it is still a waxing phase, like this is still the moon waxing, right? And so even though it is the eclipse and we have Mercury retrograde, it might feel like, you know, kind of a little bit like jolting, you know. It's like we have all this energy and we want to do something with it, but then also feeling like things are slowing it down, and like, you know, so maybe a little clunky, right? It might feel a little bit that way. But we still have the totality of that energy. Like the moon still has an effect of waxing. It's still doing this. And so we have the opportunity to still work with this energy. Again, I would not work with it on the 19th. That's not the day that I would say to do this on, because of the chaotic energies. I would say, you know, I mean, if you want to do it before Mercury goes retrograde, maybe later in the day on the 20th, because it's like kind of in between, or maybe even waiting until the weekend, right? Like just because Mercury is retrograde doesn't mean it should stop us from making plans. It just means like, or setting intentions, right? Or doing any of those things, right? Mercury goes retrograde, like, you know, at least like what, 2-3 times a year, like 3 times a year, right? Like 3 times a year it goes retrograde. So it's like, we can't stop our life just because Mercury goes retrograde. It's really just slowing us down to be more thoughtful about what we're doing. So just take maybe some time to be a little bit more thoughtful about the intentions that you're creating, or the new moon energy, like manifestation thing that you're doing, or the ritual that, you know, or spell work that you're doing, whatever it is. And, you know, maybe give it a few days away from the eclipse, like to the weekend or something like that. And then, you know, just make sure that you take your time with it and make sure you're very sure about what it is that you're creating with more intention. And that in a way can be really powerful. So I would say, you know, that's what I'm seeing here. Your spiritual advice that we're seeing that's coming up is the Eight of Cups. It's really interesting because this card in the tarot deck is actually an eclipse. How perfect is that? So so this particular card is about going on this kind of, you know, spiritual journey, and it may feel a little bit solitary at this particular time, you know, especially depending on where it's hitting in your chart, right? So, but this is a time for you to like say, okay, like whatever this like stuff is that was like past that felt really heavy for me, it's like, it was too heavy. I need to just let that go and move forward on my own path, like on my own spiritual path. I'm letting go of the heaviness. I'm allowing eclipse season to like help me release that consciously, right? And instead of it just being like taken away, just like be like, okay, that shit was too heavy, or that like those people or that connection or this project or whatever it was, like whatever has been going on, maybe even just like way back in your past like stuff. It's like, all right, I'm leaving that. That's too heavy. I'm going to go off onto like this spiritual kind of quest of my own. And I'm going to find for myself what feels right to me, what feels spiritual, what feels aligned. So, and this particular card, I just realized I didn't actually explain it. I was just talking about the position of it. So we have the Eight of Wands, and the Eight of Wands is where you should be putting your attention towards growing. And what you're getting with the Eight of Wands is the green light about what it is that you're passionate about. I'm really feeling like these cards have a connection, right? So you're getting the green light with the things that you want to create, the things that you're passionate about, whatever it is that you're wanting to really move towards, right? You're getting the green light to go. And I think that you need to be very thoughtful about it, that you need to really take some time to go inward, and connect to what feels right, what feels the best, right? Remember that we're looking at water. So we've got water and fire here, which is really interesting kind of combination, but you know, again, like it might seem counterintuitive because you're just like, well, it's waxing and it's giving me the green light to go. But then there's also the eclipse that's happening and Mercury retrograde. And this is telling me to go on this like, you know, quest basically. And I think that there's a world within which this all can work together very nicely. Like, I think you can still have the green light to go forward. It's more just being, again, like I said, more methodical, slowing it down, revisiting, revising, taking slower steps, making sure that the steps that you take, you're very very like sure about, that you've really gone over it, you know, go back over it and then take those steps forward. So it's not saying stop, it's definitely saying go. I would say to get like maybe an overall picture, go back and revisit the monthly for April, and I'll have that on the screen somewhere, so that you can go back and check that out and get a sense of like maybe the bigger picture. And again, if you really want to know what's specifically up for you, you can book a reading with me. So I will see you in the next video. Bye.